The Umpire Inspire podcast is all about the stories, all about the journeys, and all about the heart of being an umpire. I'm your host, Jason Becker. Hello, umpire friends. I hope everybody out there is doing well today. Thank you very much for tuning into today's show. Great guest today. I've been very excited to bring this episode to you. You can make a pretty strong case that the gentleman you're about to hear from is responsible for the training and instruction of more umpires than anyone else in the world. His organization includes millions of ball players, served and supported by over 1 million volunteers in more than 80 countries. The organization is Little League International, and the umpire joining us today is Little League's Director of Umpire Development, Tom Rawlings. Before we join Tom, a quick note for you about the Umpire Inspire podcast. The episode you are about to hear concludes season 1 of the show. So please stick around after my interview with Tom because I want to share some details with you about what comes next for Umpire Inspire. All right, so this conversation with Tom is just jam-packed with umpire goodness. We discuss how he started umpiring and how he came to his position within Little League. We hear terrific stories about Tom's assignment behind the plate for the Little League Baseball Championship game in 2011, including a really great story about one of the catchers that he worked with during that game. And we get to hear Tom's thoughts and a lot of specific tips on what it takes for a Little League umpire to move from good to great. And lots more. And throughout all of this, you're going to meet a guy that is absolutely dedicated to Little League's ideals and to training up Little League umpires all around the world. Please enjoy my visit with Mr. Tom Rawlings. Tom, welcome to the Umpire Inspire podcast. It's great to have you.
Jason, thank you very much for the invitation.
Such a pleasure, even just getting to know you just over the past couple weeks as we've been scheduling this, and you've already been very generous in just chatting with me when we've connected over the phone and over email, and so I've really been looking forward to this. Thank you very much. First things first, Tom, could you please just introduce yourself, what your role is, your paying gig, and what responsibilities that entails for Little League International?
Certainly. I'm Tom Rawlings. I am the Director of Umpire Development for Little League International. I frequently tell people that I am the only paid umpire in the Little League organization.
That's right.
But interestingly enough, I'm not paid for working games. I continue to work games as a volunteer. So I spend a lot of time providing training, observing training, writing curriculum, speaking with the other umpire and chiefs from the different regions regarding strategies for how we want to begin broaching certain subjects.
So, Tom, you're going on 5 years now as in your position with Little League. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. When did you first start thinking that you might consider Little League as your full-time employer? How did that happen?
Long story. It goes back to I was obviously actively involved as an umpire and as an instructor at the international headquarters schools when Andy Konyar announced his retirement. And I actually began thinking about it at that point. But at the same time, I was also a full-time career employee of the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. And so my wife and I had to sit down and talk money, budgets, what was and was not possible.
Right.
And just over the course of time, things literally just kept breaking in my favor. And one day, Mr. Steve Keener and Pat Wilson made the formal offer to me. And my wife, God bless her, said to me, "If you tell him no, you're an idiot." And so from that day forward, I became a full-time employee of Little League. And
Why did she tell you that? Why did she insist that this was going to be a good choice for you?
uh, she knew how much, or she knows how much Little League meant to me,
Yeah.
what it meant to be an umpire inside that program. Like, so many of us, I grew up as a kid playing Little League baseball. And as I aged out of that program, I began to realize that you're never going to make a living playing this game,
Hmm.
but you really like being around it. So you have to find some other way to stay involved. And I shelved that thought for many years, but eventually came back to it. And that's sort of the driving thought process that led me into umpiring.
Before I ask you to take us back, going on 30 years now that you've been a volunteer umpire for Little League. Before we go there, your wife kicks you in the pants to take this job. You take it, and you say there's been not one regret ever since. But has there been anything surprising to you about becoming director of umpire development that you maybe didn't expect when you first took the job?
I think what caught me most off guard is, and it's going to sound corny, but to me, the employees of Little League function in a very family-like fashion. They tend
Huh.
to take care of each other. They tend to look out for each other and support each other. And that's surprise. I shouldn't say, no, it did surprise me. I mentioned I had been an employee of the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, and prior to that, I was active duty Army. So my models for the way an employer would act to things were nowhere near what I have fortunately encountered since joining Little League.
Well, when you describe your experience as a staff member there in Williamsport, that doesn't surprise me one bit, Tom. I think I think a lot of Little League volunteers listening to this right now are out there shaking their heads in agreement. I know I am. As you know, I'm a Little League volunteer out here in West Region,
Mm-hmm.
and every one of us knows how lucky we are to um, have such a great staff helping us,
Oh,
overseeing us, helping us to
absolutely.
succeed, helping the program to succeed, devoting so much time. And I have no doubt that every single region of Little League in the country and internationally operates just like that as well.
That they do. You can, from personal experience, I can attest to the fact that they all do indeed operate under that model.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I'm going to have a lot of questions about Little League coming up, but let's get back to you, Tom. I understand that it's been 30 plus years now that you've been involved with Little League as an umpire. And I wonder if you could just take us back to the beginning. What got you involved in the first place? Maybe who got you involved in the first place? And I guess the bigger question is, why did you stick around? What was it about being a Little League umpire that has kept you around for all this time?
When I was or when I was discharged from the Army and returned to Pennsylvania and began working full time in the Harrisburg area, our kids, we have a son and a daughter, were at the age where they were just entering into the Little League program. Uh, and my wife said to me, well, don't you want to get back involved with Little League? And I said, yeah, but I don't want to coach. I don't have the temperament to do that. So, I'll take the kids to practice. I'll go to the games. I'll work in the concession stand, whatever. A few days passed, and Gail came to me with something that we had way back in the dark ages called a newspaper.
I've heard of that.
And yeah, they're tough to find. And there was, of all things, a little classified ad on the sports page
Wow.
asking Have you ever wanted to be an umpire? If yes, come to this free class that was going to run like several Thursday nights over the course of a month or so. And Gail said to me, well, why don't you go to this class and see what that's all about? And of course, typical male, oh, I grew up playing this game. They can't teach me anything. But in order to keep the peace, I went to class.
Wise man.
And 5 minutes into the first class, I realized, oh my, I really don't know this game. And so that became a whole educational experience for me in realizing that a lot of what I thought were rules were myths. A lot of what I thought umpires were doing, they were not doing. I didn't really understand their role in the game. And so I went through the class and took the exam and began umpiring at that point at the high school JV level. I hadn't yet stepped back to the Little League field. But after a month or so of working JV games, the gentleman I was working a game with said to me, you need to come with me to the local Little League field tomorrow night at 6:00 and work on the little field, which I had never done. I knew nothing about the mechanics or any of the other things involved. But I went down with him and went out on the field and worked the bases in a 2-man majors level game and had the absolute time of my life on a baseball field. It was one of the most fun experiences I had, just watching the kids, watching them react to each other when they made a good play or a bad play or whatever. And I decided at the conclusion of that game, this is what I really like doing. And over the course of the next 22 to 23 years, I continued to work all levels of baseball in my area, but spent the majority of the time working the local Little League teams here in my district, because we've got several of them.
Well, Tom, that is great. And now, dear listeners, take note. We have a new recruiting tool for umpires, a classified ad in your local newspaper. Do not underestimate the power of print, I think, is the lesson we've learned here, right, Tom? From answering a classified ad to director of umpire development.
Yes, absolutely. You just never know where things are going to wind up. Correct.
So, Tom, I have a list of questions that I prepare for every interview for this show. And here's one of them that I ask just about everybody. It goes like this. Tell me about a unique experience or a big memorable game you've had. And Tom, that's comical to ask in your case. I know you've actually had a couple, but there's one that stands out. I would like you to spend a few minutes, if you would, share that story of the 2011 Little League Baseball World Series.
I was fortunate enough to be selected to work the 2011 Little League World Series at Williamsport. Just the thrill of receiving that letter. I was at work and the phone rings and it was my wife saying, I've got this letter here from Little League, and well, open it. And she opened it and started reading and caught her breath and finished reading it. I didn't believe her. I said, fax it to me, which she did. I was over the moon even at that point.
Yeah.
Getting to Williamsport and meeting the crew was an amazing experience. Obviously, umpires from around the country and around the world coming together at that time, meeting each other by and large for the first time. But we proceeded to have just, I felt, an outstanding series as a crew of umpires. I've stayed in touch with the majority of them over the years. One of the best experiences I've ever had. I know you're trying to get me to Championship Sunday, but
No, Tom. No. I correct you. I must correct you. I want to hear every detail of this entire experience.
Okay.
I do want to get to Championship Sunday. Don't get me wrong.
Okay. Well, that when we got our first assignments, because of the way everything was laid out, we try that on a day that you work a plate, you don't work another game, just so that you're fresh and relaxed and not overtaxed, either coming into a plate or leaving a plate and trying to go do the bases somewhere. So anyhow, my first assignment was not until the 8:00 game on the plate on the first night of the tournament. So I got to walk around the complex all day fretting about what was I going to be like? How bad was this going to be? Well, a very, very good friend of mine was working in the instant replay booth. And he came up to me after we were all dressed and geared and ready to walk out on the Lamade Field. He's also a former Little League World Series umpire. And he said to me, Tom, he said, no matter what you do not lift your head and look into center field.
Okay, interesting.
Okay, fine, I said to myself. And we get out there and I look at a few warm-up pitches in the top of the first inning. They announce, here we go, let's get ready to play ball. The first batter begins to make his way to the batter's box, and all of a sudden, Jim's words come back into my head, don't look in center field. So, of course, what happens? Oh, yeah. I lift my head and look into center field, and what do I see out there but that little glowing red light from the ESPN television camera. I did not realize I could be panicked that much that quickly.
Wow, got to you.
It just for an instant. But Jimmy and I have known each other for many years, and believe it or not, he knew it would have the correct effect on me. Because once that panic hit, it also immediately flowed away with the first pitch, was fortunately for me was in the dirt. and I thought, okay, everything is going to be fine. So on the half inning, when I walked back to the area where we keep the officials' water, Jimmy was standing there, and he said, "You looked at the light, didn't you?"
He knew.
And I said, "Yeah, I did. Yeah, I did." He said, "Feel better though, right?" And I said, "Yeah, I do." He said, "Good. I knew it would help." And I, to this day, tell that story to every crew that comes to Williamsport, just to let them know, sooner or later you're going to see that little red light. Don't panic over it. It's part of why you're here.
I'm going to remember that story next summer, Tom. I have my first televised assignment.
Excellent.
Working Little League softball region out here.
Okay.
In San Bernardino. So
yeah,
definitely looking forward to that. And if I see a red light, I'm going to turn the other way.
Or just give me a wave, because I'll be watching from home, critiquing your performance.
Okay, fair enough.
So anyway, the rest of the tournament was just unbelievably fun for me, especially dealing with the international kids. I had learned earlier on that whether or not they're fluent in English or I'm fluent in Japanese or Portuguese or Spanish, doesn't matter, because we're all fluent in baseball. And we managed to get our points across without necessarily speaking complete sentences, which is it's an amazing experience for people to go through. And I really can't put into words all of the good times, the fun. Were there disappointments? Yeah. Basically, did I blow a call or two? Oh yeah. I mean, I'd be lying if I said that I got them all right. No,
Mm-hmm.
I missed pitches. I may have missed a close call on the bases, but just as we try to in the regular season, you sort of put that behind you and move on to the next thing.
Of course.
Uh, I I had decided after I worked my second plate, this was the greatest tournament I've ever worked. I can go home right now and I'm happy.
The quality of the quality of the play or the work of your crew, what made it so enjoyable for you?
Both,
Yeah.
actually. I had worked championship games at other age levels in both inside and outside of Little League, but the skill level that those kids displayed up there was unbelievable.
Wow.
And I felt like the crew to a person rose to the level of the games we were officiating.
What a great feeling to go through a tournament like that, whether it's Williamsport or your local district all-stars tournament, and just feel like you're hitting on all cylinders and just working well together and communicating and doing the best job you can out there on the field.
I totally agree, and
So
I
fun.
think yeah, and I think we're all fortunate when that does happen to us, and it's a really great feeling when you know your crew is gelling and you're on top of the game. The kids are having fun, the parents are having fun, and it's just a pleasant experience for everyone involved.
Yeah, I'm thinking of my own district all-star tournaments here that take place over the course of a couple weeks, and
Hmm.
it's a journey that we all go on together, the umpires that come out to work those games, and you build such a sense of camaraderie, and you the it's a story that we all tell together over the course of those couple weeks, and you see the growth, and you start in one place as a large crew, but you end in a different place, and it's just always something to look forward to every single season.
Oh yeah, no, there's no question. The first game of the district tournament, we all begin gathering back together because we rarely have the opportunity to work together during the regular season because
Exactly.
the district is so large with so many teams and so
Yeah.
many games. So it's always a pleasure to have that gathering together again at
Yeah.
the district tournament time.
So you guys were very strong that entire tournament, and then it finally comes time to assign the crew for the championship Sunday, the international championship game, the U.S. championship game,
Hmm.
and the big game. Can you tell me what that process was like for you?
Yes, the umpire supervisors tried to work everyone's schedule so that you got two starts at every position, two plates, two first base, et cetera, et cetera.
Okay.
I worked my second plate game in the U.S. semifinal. After that game, we go back to the locker room, and at that point, the locker room was under Lamedy Stadium, and it was very, very small, and there were 16 of us jammed in there. So I gathered all my gear, put it in the gear bag, took my gear out of the locker room, back to the car to go back to the hotel. As I said earlier, I was already thrilled with the tournament I had. I was ready to go home.
Right. Yeah.
And they start reading the assignments, and they get to the championship game, and they said at the plate, Rawlings. And my initial response was, and I said it out loud, I think you made a mistake. And Andy and his two assistants looked at me and said, "No, we didn't make a mistake. That's where you're going to be tomorrow."
Tom.
So then, which yeah, I was literally over the moon at that. But then I did next day drag the gear back in through security and have my gear bag searched, and so it
Oh,
was
well, too bad,
ex-
Rawlings.
exactly. I felt so horrible. I had to do all of that.
That's
Uh, but
great. What a moment.
but and then of course it rained,
Yeah, that's part of the story of that championship Sunday, isn't it?
Yes, yes, it is. They had to keep the consolation game got totally eliminated, unfortunately. The grounds crew had the entire field covered in tarps. And when I first got to the field at about 10 o'clock in the morning, I didn't think we were going to play at
Yeah.
all. I
Yeah.
mean, that's how hard it was rain. There was
Oh
literally
man.
water pouring into the first base dugout from the
Gosh.
runoff of the drainage system. But lo and behold, the grounds crew up there, again, volunteers who come in from Williamsport, South Williamsport, some of the local college agricultural programs have students who volunteer, just did an amazing job. And by the time we threw the first pitch, you'd have been hard pressed to explain to anyone that it had rained in Williamsport that morning.
That's the family. That's the Little League family stepping up to get the job done.
Absolutely.
Whether you're
Absolutely.
a manager or an umpire or a supervisor or a member of the grounds crew,
Correct.
getting it done. Well, if we had time, I would personally go through every at bat of every inning of that game with you, but we'll have to save that for maybe a lunch date up the road somewhere, Tom. But
Certainly.
briefly, what are your memories of that championship game? Just when you think back to your experience, what are
Hmm.
the two or three things that come to mind first?
Uh, the very first one was the catcher for the team from Japan. They were the visitors for that game, so they batted first. And when they came out in the bottom of the first, I watched a couple warm up pitches, et cetera, et cetera. The batter came in from for the team from Chula Vista, California, and the first pitch, the Japanese catcher set himself literally right on the glove was right on the outside corner,
Okay.
and the pitch popped the glove. We all know the sound that it makes,
Yep.
and so I called it a strike. Pitcher gets ready to deliver the next pitch, and the catcher slides to the outside, maybe an inch, inch and a half. Glove is still right there, close to the corner, and the glove popped again. I rang that one up. So the next pitcher's on the mound getting his signal, and I see the catcher slide out. Now he's about 3 inches off the plate. And the pitch comes in, the glove never moves, the pop sound happens, and I said, ball. And without turning around, this kid says to me in perfect English, is that too far, Blue? And I said, yeah, that one's a little too far. And he said, not a problem.
That is
And
unbelievable.
I thought, now here's a well-coached little leaguer
No
who
kidding.
knows exactly umpires are going to be different from game to game. So I need to establish for my pitcher, how far out is he going to let us go? And
Wow.
that was just and then the whole game was just as you said, it was phenomenal to see it won the way it was won, with a special pinch runner at the very last minute coming into the game,
Yep.
and then a base hit through the middle. It sounds corny, but it was one of those ones you hated to see either team lose.
That is such a great story about that catcher, Tom. I'm going to repeat that one. I'm swiping that, and I'm telling. I think you'll understand this when I am teaching or training young umpires in our local league or our district, or actually more often coaches. Sometimes I suggest that
Hmm.
there are certain indicators that we notice that tell us, oh, this is a well coached team.
Yes, yes.
This kid knows how to play the game.
Hmm.
There's just a handful, but there's certain things that we notice that maybe non-umpires wouldn't.
Sure, sure.
Your experience with that young man from Japan, that's top of the list right there. That is a
Oh,
great story.
yeah, he knew exactly what he was doing and
Yeah,
why. Yeah.
yeah. Well, and the second component of that, as you rightly said, was his reaction and his conversation with you, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
I love that. I love it. So Tom, I'd like to move into asking you some questions about Little League umpires in general. Your experience being one, and now your role as a leader of Little League umpires
Hmm.
and their development. Um, you hinted earlier that you're a paid employee, but when you're working games, you do it on a volunteer basis. And that's one of the core values of being a Little League umpire. In your opinion, why is it important for Little League umpires to be volunteers?
Uh, I'll steal Steve Keener's line to start answering that. Steve likes to say that Little League is not in the business of producing major league ball players. We're in the business of producing major league citizens. We just use baseball as a way to teach that. And I think it's just, besides giving back to the game, you're giving something back to the town or the city that you live in, and hope that you help make things just a little bit better.
Very well said. I agree. What sorts of personal qualities, Tom, indicate to you that somebody would be a really great volunteer Little League umpire?
I think patience. You have to remember that, or we always need to remember that we're dealing with kids, whether they're 8, 10, 12, or 16, they're still kids. They're
Yeah.
still learning where they fit in. The coaches, by and large, that we're dealing with are also volunteers. They're
Yeah.
someone's father or mother. Uh, I think patience, the ability to communicate complex ideas very quickly, very succinctly, without coming across as demeaning or authoritarian.
Mm.
So I think the ability to be compassionate, understanding, patient, a good communicator, and understanding what your role is within the game. The old saying about, you don't want an umpire there who thinks it's his game to dictate. We're there just to make sure the game gets played fairly. That's our main focus. And if you can hold on to that thought, I think that's the beginning of what starts to make a good umpire.
So, 30 years of being a Little League umpire, Tom, what's different about being a Little League umpire now versus when you started back in 1990? What have you noticed are the biggest changes, if
I
any, between now and then?
No, I think there have been changes. I think there has been a push or a movement amongst the umpiring community itself, especially within the Little League umpiring community, to become more quote unquote professional. And when I use that word professional, I don't mean getting paid, obviously. I
Right.
mean dress, the way we dress, the mechanics that we have adopted, that we continue to refine and polish and work on, the whole attitude of the way we approach the game. So I think the whole concept of professionalism is growing across Little League as a whole. Last year, I was in Europe at the regional headquarters in Kutno, Poland, helping to teach a clinic there. And we had 29 European umpires from 11 different countries, and all of them were hungry for, how do we go about looking more professional.
Ah,
So I think that's a big thrust, and it sort of happened over time. I don't know that any one of us could point
sure.
to a moment and say that's when it started. I think it just sort of evolved out of our desire to be better.
Tom, you mentioned Europe.
Yes,
I'm curious, what is the state of umpiring in Little League internationally?
it varies. In Australia, we'll start with Australia. They have got a very active umpiring program
Huh.
in the Australia New Zealand area. The Far East uh, also is they're well established. They're doing training based on both the Little League model and Japanese professional baseball.
Hmm.
Europe is growing by leaps and bounds. More officials every year. The problem, not the problem, but some of the challenges Europe has, obviously, a lot of different languages being
Hmm.
spoken over there. The state of the physical facilities vary from country to country, but they're making, I think, enormous strides towards catching up with the rest of us. And of course, Canada being our neighbor to the north, Brad Johnston, who is the UIC in Canada, he and I communicate a lot uh, frequently to make sure that the Canadian program is moving in the exact same direction as all of the U.S. regional programs are moving. So I think across the board, uh, the status of the program is good. I think we're healthy, but I still think obviously we can get better and we will get better.
Very good. What is one? Well, first of all, let me say, I think it's fair to assume that listeners of this show are already umpires who have drank the Kool-Aid and
Mhm.
are interested to hear from someone like you about taking that next step. I've actually got 5 different points here for you, Tom. Let's just kind of rapid fire this. I'd like to know what you think, what encouragement you would give a little league umpire who is striving to move from good to great. And I'll tell
Okay.
you in which areas, okay?
Hmm.
Am I making sense?
Yes, yes.
Okay. Area number 1, overall field presence. What would you tell that umpire? What gets him or her from good to great?
They need to develop the persona on the field where they always appear relaxed, not lackadaisical, but relaxed.
Okay.
That when they move with a purpose.
Okay.
They know why they're going, where they're going, and that when they get there, they're prepared for whatever is going to happen.
Good. Very good. Okay. The umpire moving from good to great in technical skills. So responsibilities,
Hmm.
roles
Hmm.
on the field.
I think that in order to make that leap from good to outstanding is a combination of again finding those individuals like I had that mentored me,
Mm,
as well as staying current educationally, whether you're doing it online or in person at one of the training centers. That's where you start. We refer to it as polishing the rough edges down on the technical skills.
good to great for rules knowledge and interpretation. He chuckles.
Yeah, uh, because I'd like to say, "Oh, just read the rule book," but the rule book was not written to be read as a novel, which
Okay.
a lot of newer umpires make that mistake, or they, I shouldn't call it a mistake. They approach it in that fashion
Okay.
and attempt to read it like you would read a novel, and that's probably not the best way to do it. Once you've read the book several times, don't be afraid to engage yourself in discussions with other more senior officials that deal with awkward or not, yeah, odd or different situations,
Hmm.
ones that you may have to pull apart two or three different rules in order to get to this is why the ruling is what it is. And that's where the learning occurs. That's when you started to make that leap from good to extraordinarily proficient at that.
I've experienced that on the field. You have too. Many of our listeners have. And in my experience, you said the magic word, why.
Yes.
When you dig deep and when you dive in, and when, as you said, the word, when you unpack a rule or a rule interpretation or an application, and you ask, why is this rule a rule? And what does
Hmm.
it really mean?
Hmm.
When you get to a place where you can internalize that, then you've got it. Then you've
Exactly.
got it forever.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that also then allows you the ability to, going back to one of our previous points, to succinctly explain to a coach why
Yes.
it is what it is without going into a long, drawn out lecture, which will unfortunately probably turn into an argument and maybe something even uglier.
I think you just tiptoed into the next topic there, Tom.
Oh, no.
Good to great situation management.
Okay. The hardest thing I had to learn as a new official when a coach or a manager would come out to discuss something was to listen. Let them speak. Let them tell you what their concern or problem or complaint is, and let them get it the whole way out. And treat them with respect while they're doing that. Certainly guard against being uh, sarcastic or trying to make some sort of comical quip. He or she is out there for a reason. They either want information or they're trying to defend their team, which is their job.
Sure.
So communication is a two-way street, and when we can learn to the term in social sciences and psychology is when we can active listen, our ability to respond to that coach and first of all get good information out, and secondly diffuse anything potentially that could go wrong increases geometrically.
Hmm. Boy, that's a lot easier said than done. And a lot of it only comes with
It
experience,
it
but
does. Yeah. Yeah, because our normal reaction when a coach comes out is to become defensive, that
yes,
that they're challenging my skill or my knowledge.
yes,
And when we go into the conversation with that mindset, we've put ourselves at a disadvantage right away. We know why we did what we did. Now let us hear what the coach's concerns about it are.
yeah, yeah. Okay, last one. Little League umpire, good to great, attitude and effort.
Oh, I those are great. Attitude, obviously, it. I said earlier, we're not bigger than the game. It is not our game. We're part of the game. You need to let the kids, the ball players, know that you're out there having fun just as much as they are.
Hmm.
You keep your attitude positive. Their attitude stays positive. Part of the effort is we don't walk anywhere on a ball field, or at least we shouldn't. I try not to. I mean, even just coming back from getting a drink on the half inning or taking a change, I try to jog or walk briskly back to wherever it is I need to be. And that also becomes infectious.
Hmm.
I mean, if we're telling kids, come on, let's go, let's go, let's go, and we haven't moved all game long, they're not really going to react to that real well.
It's a great
Whereas if
point.
if if they've seen you moving around the field with purpose and getting into position and being ready, and you're always set to go, that's contagious. They pick
Yeah,
up on that. I mean, the truth is, none of what we do is magic, and to become exceptional at it is also not magic. It's a combination of dedicating yourself to the craft, being willing to admit to yourself you don't know it all, be willing to accept the positive and negative criticism from your brothers and sisters, and build on all of that.
Well, Tom, I think we've covered just about everything we can here.
I think, but I'd like to leave you with this parting shot. Not a shot, but it's sort of my philosophy about why I do what I do, why I've been at it for 30 years, et cetera, et cetera. Going all the way back to the rule book, Rule 1.10. The first couple words are baseball and softball is a game. And why do we play games? We play them to have fun. So if we're not having fun, we're not doing something right. So that's sort of my philosophy. We always have to remember that it is, at the end of the day, a game.
Even when you're staring at that red light out in center field, right, Tom?
Absolutely. And I had to keep saying baseball is a game. Baseball is a game.
Well, that's actually great advice, Tom, for Little League umpires all the way up to Major League Baseball umpires. And let's just leave it right there. What a great way to end this conversation. Tom, I can't thank you enough for the time that you've spent. You've been very generous today and over the past couple of weeks. And, I also thank you, send a personal thanks on behalf of myself and all of us volunteer umpires out here in Washington State. Thank you for everything you do.
Oh, thank you.
That you've put in.
Thank you for having me on. And please assure your listeners I'm available to them whenever they feel the need to ask a question or seek some guidance.
That's outstanding. Thank you for that, Tom. And I'll just say it again. Thank you for the time you spent with us here today. With everything you've got going on right now, all the best to you, and hopefully we'll run into you soon.
Jason, thank you for your time. I hope your listeners enjoyed hearing me prattle on, and let's all try to stay safe out there.
All right, my friend. Thanks again, Tom. We'll talk soon.
Okay, take care.
Well, it was an honor and a pleasure for me to visit with Tom, and being reminded of all the people, not just umpires, who give so much of themselves to make youth baseball happen all around the world. It makes me very proud to call myself a Little League umpire. Okay, so as I mentioned at the top of the show, this episode concludes Season 1 of the Umpire Inspire podcast. First and foremost, I want to thank you for listening, and I really hope that you have enjoyed it. It has been so much fun creating this podcast for you. And for me too. I'm an umpire just like you, and so even though I happen to be the interviewer, I'm also a listener, and the opportunity to hear from these great guests and learn from their stories and their experiences, it's been awesome. And the good news is there's much more to come. I am going to take a short hiatus to reevaluate and assess the show, to consider what worked well and what can be improved, and to plot out some new ideas and new directions that the show can go in the future. So we're not calling the game here, okay? Just calling time. And in a little while, we'll put the ball back in play and enjoy more great umpires from all around the world who will inspire and motivate us. If you haven't yet subscribed to the show at your podcast platform of choice, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and the rest, I do encourage you to do that so that you'll be locked and loaded when new episodes drop later this year. And also keep an eye on the Umpire Inspire Facebook page, because I do expect to continue to share information and possibly some new content there during this brief break. And here's one final request. If you know someone that you feel would be a great guest on the show, someone that represents the values of Umpire Inspire in that he or she has a positive attitude toward umpiring and a story that other umpires can learn from and be inspired by, let me know. Shoot me an email at jason@umpireinspire.com or message me on Facebook. I would be very happy to hear from you. And let's leave it right there. If all goes well, then many of us will be starting the engines back up again soon, which is very good news. So when you get back out onto the field, hey, offer up your very best effort to the players and to the game itself. Be courteous, be approachable, seize the opportunity to demonstrate character and integrity and respect for rules to the young people who are watching you. Go to work from the minute you walk on the field to the moment you walk off after the game. Give the game and the players your very best effort and attention. Do not let anyone out hustle you. And most importantly, know that you make a difference, because when you're doing your job well, you're not just enabling the game to be played, you are enhancing the experience for everyone. Continue to take good care of yourselves and your families, and I will see you next time on the Umpire Inspire podcast.